We're approaching the fall months. It's going to become pie time. So today we're going to start off here with 2.5 cups of flour, and here we have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Just throw that in, and we also have 1 tablespoon too. So you're just going to want to mix that around a bit so that it's all evenly distributed. So the other thing I have here is 1 cup of butter. So I like to cut it up into small pieces because you're going to be breaking it into the flour here, and this makes it a little bit easier to handle. So it's a bit faster when you're doing it. So now what you have to do is mix the butter into the flour here. So in order to do that, you just start breaking this into smaller pieces. So just using your hands, start breaking them up into smaller pieces. Ideally, what you're going to end up with at the end are small pieces that are about this big. So they say like pea-sized. So that's usually about the size that I go with. A little bit smaller pieces. I usually use both hands and just kind of squeeze the butter through. So this is really something that you have to get a feel for. The reason why I do it by hand is the fact that as you're mixing the butter in, the heat from your hands actually melts the butter down a little bit and coats some of these pieces of flour. So you might remember in my last video on bread that we were saying we really want to develop the gluten so that we'll have these nice strands, but it starts to make things tough, but you don't really want to have a tough pie dough. That's why we're putting so much fat into it. So we will actually add water to this later on, and that will start to develop some of the gluten, but the fact that you're coating some of the flour with butter makes it so that not as much gluten can develop. So you're actually making your dough a little bit what they would call short. So this is something that helps keep your pie crust more tender. So as you're going along, just keep feeling through to put any big chunks. So that's what I keep doing here. Just let it fall through your fingers and you'll be able to hold on to some of the bigger pieces and then just start breaking them up a little bit. So the whole reason why we want to have all these small pieces of butter is that once we roll it out, these little pieces right here are going to flatten. So it'll be something like this. So that once it goes into the actual pie crust, when you bake it, those flattened pieces of fat are going to start puffing up, and that's how you get it to be very flaky. Okay, so we're looking pretty good here. So the next two things that we have to add are, first, right here, I have 3 tablespoons of yogurt. The original recipe calls for sour cream, but I like to use a nice vanilla yogurt just because of the flavor. It's better if you use like one of the more full fat yogurts. This one's only 2.5, but you may not want to use a fat-free one because it doesn't have as much of an effect as this kind does. You would use yogurt like this if you're going to make a dessert kind of pie. So we're making peach pies with it. So if you're going to make apple pie or blueberry pie or something, you'd want to use this. If you're using this to make a meat pie, you're definitely not going to want to use vanilla yogurt because it's going to be kind of weird. So you can use sour cream, and then in this case, you would just leave out the sugar, and it should work out the same. So we'll just add that in there. The second thing we need is about a quarter of a cup plus or minus a little bit of ice cold water. So you can probably see I got a little ice cube floating in there. You want the water to be as cold as possible. The reason for that again is when it's really cold, it helps to retard some of the gluten development. So some people say that they're okay with having pieces of ice in the dough. I'm not okay with that. I find it turns out kind of weird if you have a little piece of ice in the crust. Once it melts, it has this kind of soggy part to it. So probably gonna need more than that. So add another 1/8 of a cup in there. This is a recipe my mom sent me a while ago, but we never actually wrote down exactly how much water we need. So every time we just kind of play it by ear. So you don't want to knead this or anything, but you want to make sure that all of the water gets through. So it's still a little bit dry. You don't have to make sure that the whole thing is hydrated because this is going to sit for about half an hour at least. Probably about a couple hours would be ideal, but all of the water will start to diffuse through the rest of it. So you don't want it to be too wet, but we'll add a little bit more. You just want to make sure that everything pretty much comes together. Okay. So I'm going to put this on the counter here. Just to get the rest of these parts in. So as you can see, you can start to gather this into a ball almost. So that's pretty good for water content. You'll notice that there's wetter parts of it. So we're just going to let this sit for a little bit. And then we'll roll it out in a little bit. So we'll just put that back in our bowl. And then just cover it with plastic wrap. All right, so we'll put this in the fridge for about an hour or two.